I personally, and this is not a CAIR position, this is my personal position, I think the Laura Loomers of our world are inside the government. Honestly, if you think about it, if you're joining ICE now, knowing what ICE is doing, there's no way on earth you don't share those views. So for me, it is within. There are people whose allegiance and loyalty is to this foreign state engaged in genocide, Israel. And they're using their position.
They better not do that in California because we'll be ready for them. And so for your listeners who maybe aren't already supporting CAIR, I would say they should, because how dare the Trump administration try here, where we have over 130 CAIR staff. Oh, you went after our keynote speaker? No. Like, this was not going to stand. And so the conversation Hussam and I had that morning was, we're going to do this. We're going to get him out. He's our guest. He's our brother. And for certain, he will be our client. And so people asked that morning, who's representing him? And without hesitation, we're his lawyers. Hussam got one answer where he was like, this is my answer, not the CAIR answer. So I'm going to use that privilege. I think we need to abolish ICE. That's my answer, is that this is a racist agency that was created post 9/11 with a mandate of making America white again. And we need to just say that out loud and say these are essentially thugs that have been hired to terrorize our communities.
I tell people the general, if you are a U.S. citizen, you should use this privilege to the max.
With ICE in the headlines and serious questions about constitutional rights, I wanted to bring you a conversation that helps make sense of what's actually going on. I had a chance to sit down with Zahra Billoo, Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, in San Francisco Bay Area, and Hussam Ayloush, CEO of CAIR California, to talk through what happened behind the scenes during ICE's detention of journalist Sami Hamdi and what it took to get him released. But we don't stop there. We push the conversation forward to the bigger picture, how ICE and the Department of Homeland Security apply pressure, what courts can and cannot do to stop it, and practical guidance for citizens, residents, students, and visitors alike who want to speak up about civil rights and the genocide in Gaza, but without taking unnecessary risks. Zahra Billoo, Hussam Ayloush, welcome to the American Muslim Dialogue. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
So for folks who may not know the inside story about Sami Hamdi's detention, you two were the first to visit him there, along with Amina Fields, who's an attorney, immigration attorney at the CAIR-CA office. So I wanted to ask you, at what point did each of you realize this was not a routine immigration issue, but something political and urgent? Maybe we can start with you, Zahra.
Immediately. I woke up on Sunday morning. I believe it would have been October 26th. And somebody had tagged me in a conversation. And it was a tweet from a right-wing online extremist gloating about how Sami had been taken. That's all I remember about the content of it. But the timing, the brother, and the way in which we were first learning about it was all, what are you, like flashing sirens or glaring sirens, whatever. Like, it's like something's really wrong. This is not how we start Sunday mornings.
Alarm bells running.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was right away.
And for you, Hussam?
Likewise. I mean, when he first called, before the call, actually, I would say he has been asking, he's been telling me, listen, I've been getting a lot of threats, online by some of these Islamophobes saying, hey, we're going to be targeting you. You shouldn't, be here in the U.S. So he knew that his speech and the topics he's choosing are upsetting some of the Islamophobes. So he knew, which should not be an issue in America, but in the time we live in today, he knew that this is making an impact. And then immediately when I got the call early in the morning, telling me that basically ICE is speaking with him and they want to, they want him to be escorted to their car instead of putting him on the first flight. You knew that this is not normal because, what do you do with somebody you don't want in the country? You send them back, right? When they say no, we're not going to send you back. We're going to take you with us. it is not a usual process, and you knew it's very political.
Mm-hmm. And then Zahra, you were saying how you just knew he disappeared. Tell me a little bit about the story of how you finally located him.
Sure. So we see the tweet. I don't remember the order of the calls I made, but I talked to Hussam. I talked to some family members. And at first, there's a question of who took him. Before Hussam and I spoke, it's a question of who took him. Because he was taken from the domestic terminal at San Francisco International Airport.
Okay.
He wasn't trying to enter the country. He had entered the country days prior. He had a valid visa. So I called Customs and Border Protection at the San Francisco International Airport. Ordinarily, you can't get any information out of them, but we try every time because even what you don't get will tell you something. In this instance, what struck me was that they said, we don't have him. They went so far as to say, this is who we have. We don't have him. We don't know what you're talking about. So something else was going on. I called a friend who does immigration work in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he said, when people are taken by some other agency, where do they go? I've joked a lot that I'm actually not an immigration attorney. I'm a civil rights attorney. I became one. I became an immigration attorney on October 26th. And so he said, okay, well, if we think it's ICE, then ICE has a detainee locator. Let's look him up. So ICE has a detainee locator, and if you ever have a family member that goes missing and you think it was ICE, go to the detainee locator. You just need their first name, their last name, and where they were born. So I entered Sami's information, born in the United Kingdom, and he showed up. He was at ICE in San Francisco. So I called them. I think he got dropped off at the airport that morning around 6:45 a.m. They had already abducted him before 7:30 a.m. So by the time we're talking to ICE in San Francisco, it's now a little past 10 a.m. This is all happening really fast. And they're like, oh, we don't have him. We already processed him. Okay, so where is he going? Oh, he's going to Golden State Annex, which is a detention center in Southern California, or kind of Central California. And now you're like, okay, let's see. And it's this like wait and see, cat and mouse. At some point, he disappears from the detainee locator because he's between locations until he reappears again at Golden State Annex. Long about way of saying what happens when somebody is kidnapped is that you first have to ask who took them. And then it's a process of elimination.
And then Hussam, it was within a few hours or within that same day, right? All the CAIR offices, CAIR San Francisco Bay Area, CAIR Los Angeles, the Muslim Legal Fund of America, and outside attorney Hassan Ahmed, they came together, and the legal team. How did the legal team come together so fast?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting organic process, meaning a lot of people were concerned from the local community, obviously, and also internationally. His parents, his family were in touch with Sheikh Omar Suleiman, in touch with community leaders, and it was on various private groups that, activists, communicate with each other, whether it's local, national, update each other. So immediately, the experts, obviously with the legal expertise is Hassan Ahmed, and he did initiate some processing that involves tracking where he's at, based on his experience. But also as CAIR team was jumping on it, CAIR National doesn't do a lot of immigration work, so they understood that CAIR California would probably put, the brunt of the work initially, because we have a very robust, solid immigration team throughout the state.
Okay.
Mashallah, the availability of Zahra, myself, although it's a Sunday and we're both traveling from, I'm traveling from Sacramento, from herself. I think it was the Bay Area at that time, or were you in
LA?
LA.
I was
you
coming
had
from
the
LA.
conference.
Yeah.
You had the conference that day in the Valley. So we're both traveling to San Diego to speak and support the CAIR San Diego team for their banquet. But in the meanwhile, everybody was at full speed offering their help, from outside of CAIR. Actually, we had a lot of attorneys offering their help, organizations or individuals. But alhamdulillah, by then, we had a good, solid team made up of CAIR California team, MLFA, and Hassan Ahmed. We felt, at least for the core, to make it easy to run the show, decision making, it's better to stick to that group. while keeping our options open, and if we need anybody else's help, alhamdulillah. The nice thing about this case was that it was not that complicated from a legal perspective, right? It was clearly a misuse of existing system, the existing process, to abuse him. So it wasn't about getting an unfavorable ruling at the end. They knew it's dead-ended for them, for the government. They knew that there's nothing, because it is still not illegal and criminal to have an opinion in America. It might not be very popular. It might get you in trouble socially, on media, but still, you can be in prison for saying Israel is committing a genocide and Palestinians deserve to live. But they can use a system or abuse the system. So what we witnessed here is basically, in my opinion, Israeli agents within our government agencies abusing their role, their system, their positions to punish Sami. So for us, we knew there's going to be a need for, and probably Zahra can elaborate a little bit more about some of the details of how the legal team, formed a strategy. But for us, we knew there would be a legal strategy that requires protecting, because sometimes even if legally they can't punish you, well, you still have to deal with the legal issues, because they can make life miserable. What could take a week will end up taking 6 months. That's something that, inshallah, Zahra can elaborate more. But also there was a political, a policy aspect, and advocacy.
Right.
How do we address the public? There was, a communications and public relations strategy. So there was an action alert, asking the community to respond, reaching out to allies. So that's how we formed immediately a team. And alhamdulillah, I think it worked well, because eventually he's free with his family now.
Yeah. And if Zahra, you can elaborate a little bit more for the layperson, like the legality of how, because we've seen people go into detention and they're not necessarily out, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But in Sami Hamdi's case, what were the issues that you dealt with? What was your strategy?
Sure. Can I actually add to what Hussam said about the legal team? Credit to the CAIR Los Angeles office. More than a decade ago, when the uprising began in Syria, more than a decade, and people began to flee and arrive in the United States, CAIR Los Angeles was the first CAIR office in the country to say, we need to expand our services to include immigration legal services. Because for so long, CAIR's work had been focused entirely on civil rights, and that remains the bread and butter of our work, but it is narrowly focused on people who are settled here. Not narrowly focused. It is limited in its scope to people who are settled here, in many cases who have U.S. citizenship, who are English speaking, and in some cases have a lot of privilege. But here you have an influx of Muslim immigrants coming without any assistance. And if we can't help them resettle in the United States successfully, we're looking at generations of poverty. We're looking at generations of alienation. And so CAIR Los Angeles launched that more than a decade ago, and it then informed our ability to launch immigration programs across the state of California. And so the reason I would say the legal team came together so quickly is because for close to a year now, we've been watching ICE, the Trump administration, weaponize immigration law to target political activists. Mahmoud Khalil, Rumeisa Ozturk, Mohsen Mahdawi, Leqaa Kordia, Yaqub Ira, right? It's the list goes on. Brother Marwan in Texas, right? Like there's a long list of people. And I think Brother Hussam and I, maybe independently, but also together, had at times said they better not do that in California, because we'll be ready for them. And so for your listeners who maybe aren't already supporting CAIR, I would say they should, because how dare the Trump administration try here, where we have over 130 CAIR staff. Oh, you went after our keynote speaker? No. Like, this was not going to stand. And so the conversation Hussam and I had that morning was, we're going to do this. We're going to get him out. He's our guest. He's our brother. And for certain, he will be our client. And so people asked that morning, who's representing him? And without hesitation, we're his lawyers. We're his lawyers. Alhamdulillah, Hassan is a close friend, and we have a close partnership with MLFA, so we were happy to collaborate with them based on their experience in some of these cases that I mentioned. But what was clear was inaction was not an option, and neither was delay.
Right.
So the legality. When the ICE agents approached Sami at the airport, they said, "You are out of status. Your visa is no longer valid." To which he said, "No, I have permission to stay here until April. I have a valid visa. It's a multiple entry. It's many years." And they said, "No, your visa was revoked." And they handed him a document that showed that his visa had been revoked 2 days prior. He had no idea. So yes, he was out of status, but they manufactured that. That's it. That's all they ever accused him of legally. They said all sorts of horrible things on Twitter or X or Truth Social, whatever they were using. But where an actual evidentiary standard exists, they had nothing. So we went forward and we said, "No, you are targeting him based on his speech. You've manufactured this visa overstay to hold him. That's unconstitutional. It's an overreach of your authority, and you need to release him immediately."
So we had Dinesh D'Souza clips that stitched Sami's speech together on Twitter. Then we had Ted Cruz amplify it. And then Laura Loomer demands his visa be revoked, right? And days later, it's revoked with no notice or grace period for Sami. So Hussam, you were alluding to this, but what is it in our current system that allows for pro-Israel and Islamophobic, that media ecosystem, to affect the machinery of the state?
Sure. I personally, and this is not a CAIR position, this is my personal position, I think the Laura Loomers of our world are inside the government. Like, they don't need an outside person to trigger. But it looks like, it's almost like a show. Like, oh, she said, she alerted. No, they're in our government, and within DHS, DOJ, the FBI specifically. Within DHS, you have ICE, CBP. You have people who share those views. The people beating up migrants today on the street, and sometimes citizens, under the pretext of, oh, we thought you were a migrant, as if a migrant deserves to be dehumanized. These are not people triggered by external factors. This is not people who are listening to the radio and saying, oh, target. They feel that way. Honestly, if you think about it, if you're joining ICE now, knowing what ICE is doing, there's no way on earth you don't share those views. So for me, it is within. There are people whose allegiance and loyalty is to this foreign state engaged in genocide, Israel. And they're using their position, as I said earlier. There are people like Ted Cruz who engage in this behavior because two factors, whether they're funded through AIPAC as an elected official or because of their ideological views as a Christian right evangelist who sees Israel's crimes committed by Israel as a way to speed up, the second coming of Jesus, peace be upon him. Besides the point, it's ideological from within. So for me, when I look at what happened, is a collusion of things. Yes, she spoke. She doesn't have as much influence as we think she does. It is, she has only because there are many who share her views and even more without her trigger. The point I'm making is what we're dealing with today is a challenge within the U.S. government. And I'm not saying everybody within the government has loyalty to a foreign state.
Right. Even Sami was saying some are like questioning why did this even happen.
Exactly. And if you think about it, from an American, I'm not one of those nationalists and all of that, but from a neutral perspective, if you listen to what Sami has been saying, it is probably some of the most pro-American thing a person can say. Right? Like, basically what he's saying simply, don't spend your tax money on any foreign country. Use it to help the poor, the needy, the unhoused, the sick, the elderly, the students, your people. Use it to uplift your own people in America. I don't think there's anything more pro-American than that, right? I might not even go that far. I'm okay with helping countries in need, people in need around the world, for humanitarian purposes. He's even saying, all the extreme kind of keep your money for yourself until you figure out a way not to have your money being abused by other governments. Yeah. So from an American perspective, that would have been, meaning Sami did not say or do anything that could put America in harm or in harm's way. Nothing. All he did is he basically made people who support Israel or whose loyalty is to Israel feel uncomfortable because he's saying what a lot of people in America are saying and around the world. But for them, it's like, it's no longer about silencing him. It's about sending a message that if you do that, if you engage in criticizing Israel, we are going to get you. We're going to make your life miserable. So this was about sending a message to foreign journalists and political analysts like him and commentators, but also to people in America to feel like this is a red line. That's why, as Zahra was talking, we saw the targeting or the weaponizing of immigration laws and other laws, student campus laws, and so on, to silence students, professors, people who are in the workplace, activists, politicians, either legally or through this peer pressure that exists. And that's one of them. Create the climate of fear. And now you have to think about it. If you're a political commentator on visa or hoping to come to the U.S., there's no way on earth you're not thinking twice about it now. It's like, well, do I need to put myself into this?
Mm-hmm. And Zahra, even that edited clip that Laura Loomer posted wasn't even used. It was never used in court, right? No. And, what does it mean that the actual courtroom would even touch it, even though that was the impetus of all this action against him?
So it's worse than that. It's not that the court wouldn't touch it. It's that the government didn't even produce it. Mm-hmm. So to give you a sense of the timeline, the day after he's kidnapped, we visit him and we become concerned that they will move him out of California. Mm-hmm. The reality that he was arrested in California is what I've often quoted. I don't know where the quote comes from, but in describing the Muslim ban of the first Trump administration, people said it was malevolence tempered by incompetence. Mm-hmm. It was the same thing here. You wanted to punish Sami. You wanted to torment Sami. You wanted to make an example of Sami. So you arrested him in the state with the biggest CAIR chapter in the country, with not good detention facilities by any means, but better than Texas or Louisiana. He was on his way to Florida. God forbid they had arrested him in Florida, sent him to Alligator Alcatraz or whatever they call it out there.
Yeah.
So we get worried that they're going to move him because they said they were going to move him to Fresno, but why? What's in Fresno at night? We just spent the day with him. We filed a lawsuit to urge the federal court to prevent ICE from moving him and to also put forward that his detention is itself illegal. Mm-hmm. And so this kicks off a number of different filings that we need to do. And on one of the days that we're responding, right? So we file the lawsuit, they respond, now we have to respond. The Department of Homeland Security is on X posting, smearing Sami with baseless allegations. We're literally writing
on
our
the same
response.
Day.
We're writing our response, and it's due to the court that afternoon, and they are giving us material on X to make the point that this is targeted persecution, that this is about his speech. We took screenshots of what they posted on X, and we submitted that to the court, and the court repeatedly agreed with us. The court said to ICE, you can't move him. The court said that we have raised substantial, significant, important First Amendment concerns, right? And so that's where we are. And as we are winning in court, the Department of Homeland Security never produces anything accusing Sami of this crime or that crime or any crime. They thought that maybe they would scare us. They thought that maybe they would win in the court of public opinion, but where evidence mattered, they had none.
Right. And I actually wanted to go to another case in Texas. Leqaa Kordia, we heard her, I don't know if you heard today, her voice from inside the detention center. Her cousin shared what she was saying, and basically she relays a disturbing account of the conditions of her detention. Basically, the facility is overcrowded. It's only made for 37 people, and 87 people are in there. And she described it as just one big bathroom. And it's probably no privacy, which is probably a very difficult situation, for someone who wears hijab like yourself and myself. Do you know what is similar between Leqaa's detention and Sami's, and why isn't she out yet despite two judges ordering her to be released?
So detention conditions are horrible. And I think hijab or no hijab, right? Sami talked about in one instance he was in a facility, and I think he said that there was a toilet in the middle of the room, and there were 30 men. And if you had to go number 2, you had to warn everybody, right? Close your eyes and your nose. And so male or female, hijab or not, I would not wish these conditions on anyone. I'm not very familiar with Leqaa's case. And that might be part of the problem, is that there has been so much good work put on her case, and still, like, she's detained. She's one of the, I think she is the last Colombia protester who remains detained.
Yeah.
And while a number of protesters have walked free, she has not. But I'm not familiar with why not. What I can offer is that the government has been fighting really hard. And this administration has demonstrated repeatedly its complete disregard for the rule of law and for the function of our courts. We've seen them firing immigration judges mid-hearing. So immigration judges are reporting, like, I will be in a hearing and I get the email that says your services are no longer needed. The Trump administration has repeatedly badmouthed the courts. The Trump administration has moved political prisoners quickly, as in before you can file anything, because they want to move you into less friendly jurisdictions. And they do that because you're less accessible once you're there. I don't think Leqaa is originally based in Texas. They put her there to isolate her from everyone. And so while I can't speak to what basis the Trump administration has for holding her longer, I'm not surprised. I've seen in past cases this year where the court says this plane cannot leave U.S. soil to take these detainees to another country. And the Trump administration will say, oh, we didn't get the memo and the plane took off.
Oh, wow.
It's that bad.
And Hussam, if you wanted to add anything to that, but also Sami argues that there's a ladder here where they couldn't successfully go after American citizens. Then they tried naturalized citizens, then green card holders, then student visas, and finally they landed on him, a British visitor on a B1, B2. Does that reflect what CAIR has been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to what Zahra said also in terms of how incompetent these people are in our government, which makes me feel very nervous about our security, our safety, our well-being as a country, because it's in the hands of ideologues instead of civil servants who are trying to do their job. It's always worrisome because that means they're not there to do their job.
They're diverting their resources to
advance an agenda, whether it's a xenophobic one or an anti-Palestinian one, or depending. In this case, I add also, yes, they made the mistake of choosing the wrong person, not just the wrong state, the wrong timing, because he's not someone to be intimidated. I mean, I've known Sami, I've had the chance to engage with him, and when he came to various CAIR events, just listening to him online, that this is a person who has dedicated his life to speaking truth to power and expose the genocide and the injustices. So, if anything, instead of intimidating him, it actually backfired. And now he has so much more material to expose not only the genocide, but the system of power that exists, political or media and otherwise, that continues to enable that genocide, on a side note. But back to your question, yes, it is certainly, because every time I go to a mosque, people ask me, am I safe to speak, on the issue?
Actually, I was going to ask you, like, as far as people from the community, are they asking, can I invite a speaker like Sami Hamdi? Can I go to a protest? Can he come to our masjid now that all of this happened?
So I'll tell you the general guidelines, and our senior attorney, mashallah, ED, Zahra can elaborate in the more details, mashallah. I would say, I tell people the general. If you are a U.S. citizen, you should use this privilege to the max, because you have a privilege, not just a right. And as a Muslim, you have a mandate. It's an obligation. For us, free speech is not just a right, but it's actually a mandate, especially when it comes to speaking up against injustice, whether it's our immigrant and migrant neighbors who are being targeted and dehumanized, or it is Palestinians or our visitors. Either way, speak up. If you're an imam, you're a student, obviously consult with your local CAIR team to know what are the parameters in your area, in your city. If you work at a college, if you work at at the workplace, you don't have free speech. So at the workplace, be careful. But at a masjid, as a student, as an activist, having your social media, use it to the max to expose injustice. Again, never cross the line. As a Muslim, not to be on the safe side, just as a Muslim, never cross the line to call for violence, to promote bigotry against any group of people, to generalize based on behavior agencies. Now, if you're on if you're a permanent resident, a green card holder, I would be very careful, because the ability to adjust your status is in the hands of people who are biased. If everything was done through the legal system, yes, free speech is still protected. You should not lose your green card or your ability to naturalize because you criticized a Trump policy. But we're dealing with a president who is very insecure and might not like it, or his fans might not like it. So I would tell people, you don't need to be at the forefront. There are many, many ways, less public, that you can still remain to be active. You can engage politically, talk, organize, register people to vote. So many other ways. Volunteer at your masjid, volunteer at CAIR. And if you are a visitor on a visa, I would say stay out of the U.S. politics and public commentary in general. Again, case by case. But because, again, having a visa is a privilege given by the U.S. There's no specific right that forces a government, any government, to give a visa or provide a visa to a visitor. So even though you're doing a great thing from a moral perspective and a justice perspective, so these are the general areas how I advise people when I go to the mosque or I go to the MSAs, Muslim Student Associations, and I'm asked if foreign students, tell them, focus on your education, attend the Jum'ah, attend the programs, the activities, but, you don't need to be the one leading the protest and writing the op-eds, because we saw, Rumaisa was targeted for writing an op-ed, Mahmoud was targeted for organizing protests, all peaceful and legitimate.
So are we living in an era where there's tiers of civil rights that Constitution doesn't?
We've always had in America. If you're a black person, if you're a Latino immigrant, if you are at one point Mormon, if you are Catholic, if you're Jewish, for the last few decades, if you're Muslim, we've always known that laws are the same on paper but very differently practiced, when it comes to case by case, depending on, crimes are determined, or the title of the crime, who we describe as a terrorist is based on, their skin color or religious background. We know that very well, unfortunately.
So Zahra, what is needed so that ICE can't skirt the law as far as even, doing these tricks where federal judges give orders and they basically undermine them? Is there something different about the ICE as an organization that allows for this to happen, and what needs to make it stop, in your opinion?
So really quickly, going back to the thing about Sami and the ladder, I don't know who's got the ladder reversed, you or Sami, but I wanted to flag that I do think it is reversed. So it's not that they failed at citizens and green card holders and this and that, and then they went for the visa holders. They're starting with the visa holders. Mahmoud Khalil is interesting because they said to him, we're revoking your visa. And he said, I don't have a visa, I have a green card. So they said, okay, we're revoking your green card. And he's still fighting. But they're not starting with the citizens. Right now, the citizens are collateral damage. So if you look at the numbers nationally, at how many people ICE has picked up in enforcement actions since Trump took office, it should be somewhere between 170 to 200 was the last I'd heard, U.S. citizens have been picked up across thousands of non-citizens. The reason I say that it's important to flag that the ladder is reversed, because whatever they can do to non-citizens, they may eventually try with citizens, right? And some of it's happening simultaneously, but they're testing right now, right? So what they could do to Sami, they could do to someone else. That's why it was important to get him free. And so I say that to say, sometimes citizens will listen to these conversations and be like, oh, not me. No, citizens get picked up in collateral damage. And every U.S. citizen, just about every U.S. citizen I know whose family has only been here, recent immigration, 60s, 70s, 80s, still has non-citizens in their bloodlines, still has a cousin somewhere, an uncle somewhere, an in-law somewhere. And so what they can do to the most vulnerable among us, they will do to everyone. Hussam got one answer where he was like, this is my answer, not the CAIR answer, so I'm going to use that privilege. I think we need to abolish ICE. That's my answer, is that this is a racist agency that was created post 9/11 with a mandate of making America white again. And we need to just say that out loud and say these are essentially thugs that have been hired to terrorize our communities. I remember a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with a friend who's formerly undocumented. And I said, some people in my community think it sounds really radical and absurd to say we should abolish ICE. And he said, what's really radical and absurd? That your tax dollars are funding family separation, that your tax dollars are funding concentration camps, right? And this is before all of this madness, that people are living in fear of what to do. And so in the interim, we need to reform ICE. We need to hold it accountable. And this is not just an ICE problem. It is the entire Trump administration, right? You can see that the prosecution against former FBI Director James Comey, of whom I'm not a fan, is falling apart because the attorney who's prosecuting it was not properly appointed. What? Like, we have processes, we have vetting, we have approvals. And the Trump administration says, we don't like this person, we're going to put this person on to do the job. And now she's going to go wreck people's lives, and she doesn't have the authorization to do so. The judge said absolutely not. But everywhere we turn, what we see is the Trump administration flying by the seat of their pants to make policy. So if you have broken agencies, corrupt agencies with racist foundations like ICE in the hands of the most malevolent, it's hard to imagine accountability and reform, which is why personally I think we need to abolish them. But we are some ways away from that.
Well, speaking of the Trump administration, we see that Sami connects this with the larger attempt to basically censor and control what Americans can hear, right, on TikTok, independent media campus talks. And we recently heard someone like Hillary Clinton basically say young people are getting their information from TikTok, and that's a problem. How is that being translated in the policies of Trump, even though she's a Democrat?
Yeah, I think Trump's policies have preceded what Hillary Clinton said, meaning we've seen pressure to control social media, and including TikTok. That has been a major policy of the Trump administration, to bring in TikTok to where all the other social media platforms have been, censored, controlled in a way, manipulated, where now we can control the algorithm. And we've seen people who use Instagram, Facebook, and other, Twitter, X, complain again and again that they are shadow banned. Their algorithm restrict the information. So not unusual. Because Hillary Clinton might be right in a sense that social media is allowing young people to learn outside of what is meant for them to learn. The difference is they're learning the truth. Because what Clinton and her circle of a network of politicians, corrupt politicians, they've been enjoying the fact that most people have been rendered either misinformed or at least to the point where
they're indifferent.
The apathy, because none of my business, create enough distractions, which has worked well for them. I think at this point it's almost too late. They can reduce the information, but it's too late. You can't unsee a genocide, right? Like once you've seen a genocide, once you've known what at its core the Zionist state and policies and ideology call for, because you've seen it in action, not a speech. It wasn't like I heard a speech. You've seen it. You've seen the children starve to death. You've seen Israeli politicians, with no shame, justify why Palestinian children should be killed or starve to death. So after that, what else can you do? My hope, and this is not just wishful thinking, my hope based on what I see on the horizon, based on statistics, polls, survey results, is that she is a dying, disappearing dinosaur. That level and that category and that group and segment of politicians on both Republicans and Democrats are being pushed away by people who now know what's going on. We see the split happening. Today, the split in America, the political struggle in America is no longer left versus right at its core. It is no longer about liberals versus conservatives. It is really about people who see either a role for their government in taking care of Americans. I don't want to use a right-wing slogan, the America first, but it is in a sense. It's about, do we report? Are we loyal to America and its interests and its values, which are not bad values? I know we have a terrible history in how we treated people, but that was despite the good values. Do we go truthful to our values as a country, or do we continue to be manipulated, exploited by, those who say Israel is first? And that is a struggle. And that struggle is happening within the Republican Party. We see the split. And it's happening within the Democratic Party. Fortunately, the grassroots, the rank and file within the Democratic Party is up to 70, maybe 80% is anti-genocide. So she's part of the 20%, and she's living her last days of glory as a politician, because it is only a matter of time, as we've seen. It's not just a matter of opinion anymore. Opinions are translating now into votes. And we saw what happened just in the last election, whether it's in New York and Virginia,
right.
Mamdani and others, where people spoke their views. They spoke, the leadership, the establishment of Republicans and Democrats were hoping that those views and opinions remain as views and opinions at home. They didn't think people will actually walk to the ballot box and vote their views.
Yeah, exactly. And, Sami keeps saying that this isn't just about Muslims. It's about whether Americans can get uncensored truth. At the same time, we see the Latino community being targeted, mostly their community being targeted. So how does Sami's case fit into with the broader ICE targeting our adjacent targeted communities?
Sure. Yeah, I know we tend to think as Muslims we're the center of the world and everything revolves and evolves around us. And of course, I'm just joking. It's not the case. There are other communities facing injustice, and sometimes even worse than the ones we are facing. Let's face it, because of the sheer number. They're larger and they're in the millions, so their targeting obviously is impacting way more families now. There's no one probably who doesn't know someone here, at least in California, and Southern California specifically, who doesn't know someone who was impacted by recent ICE raids. And, a neighbor, a worker, a co-worker, maybe someone who does your services for at a hospital, somebody who takes care of an elderly person, take care of your garden and farm workers who are being targeted. So the impact is large because the policy of the Trump administration is multifaceted, right? Like at its core, is about making America white again. At its core, it's about, what they wrongfully and wrongly believe in is there's some theory of replacement. Like, oh my God, like we're sitting here and trying to replace, because racist people basically project. They think others have a racist kind of plan, some grand plan that liberals or white, liberals or and people of color, basically, as they say, are sitting and planning to replace. So what this has are policies that target immigrants in general, specifically. It doesn't take much. After, we have an Afghan national who worked for the CIA for the last 10 years, doing some horrible things by all standards. What do you think CIA is going to do? They're certainly not planting trees, right? They recruited this person when he was 15-year-old. And then whatever happened, he committed a tragic, horrific crime. Who gets punished? Usually a fair government would say, oh, what is the CIA doing? Why would this person snap? What did they teach him? Let's review the curriculum, the training. Who are their trainers? Who provided him a weapon? That would be the logical thing. A government with a racist agenda, what would it do? Let's punish anybody who looks like him, who belongs to his tribe, to his nationality, ethnicity, religion. So what was the result? Punishing the entire Afghan community in America and around the world. Now we can't accept visitors, migrants, immigrants from Afghanistan. People who were already approved are being vetted. But he didn't stop there, right? What the administration did, what President Trump did, he announced 30 countries that would be falling under certain restrictions where their citizens and nationals cannot come to the U.S. Remember the Muslim ban.
Right.
So what it is, there is every attempt, whenever possible, under any pretext, mostly false pretext, is to ban people who are black, brown, Arab, or Muslim. That's the general rule. Because the goal is really not about saving or protecting America. Let's face it. Anyone who's here has gone through rigid vetting process already. But it's about reducing the number. I mean, basically, what are we doing? Number one, we don't want to have more people coming in and trying our best to remove people who are already here. People who have been here fleeing warfare, hunger, insecurity somewhere in countries. And let's face it, in 9 out of 10 times, these countries are unstable, insecure, unsafe, because of some messed up policy we did in their country.
Yeah.
Either we invaded their country, like Afghanistan, or we supported one group against another in Somalia, where we destroyed their country, or we invaded Iraq and destroyed any resemblance of government. Like we sit, for me, the audacity by which an average American says, "Go back home." Well, if we don't destroy their homes, they wouldn't want to be there. Nobody likes to leave home. They're happy usually. So what we're doing is targeting people from Latin American countries and background because they are deemed as less deserving to be American. That's what it is. So what we witnessed with Sami Hamdi is a unique interpretation or a unique enforcement of that policy, but it had to do with a combination. One is, yes, it is an easy target because, yes, he's British, but he doesn't fit the category of a British. Because for the racist people in our government, you're not a true British. You're still a brown person. Your parents are originally from somewhere in the Middle East. Nah, you're okay. But it's a manifestation of the abuse of power by agencies such as ICE. That is where I think the link is ICE has a free hand. And we've all watched those videos where ICE are actually arresting U.S. citizens, screaming, "I'm a U.S. citizen," abusing them, mistreating them, and they say, "Well, too bad, now you're free."
And then, Zahra, when you hear about, when you get a case in your office, what are concrete things that listeners can do, not necessarily, represent somebody, but at least, we were talking about the pro-Zionist influence on the government. What are concrete things that the community can do to fight back so that, we can curb this kind of violation of our rights?
So many things to do. So many. The first part of your question was, somebody's detained, what can be done? At that point, the best thing to do is to get them and their family a lawyer and to ensure that them and their family are cared for and provided for. For so many detainees, they are the sole breadwinners, and they're leaving behind a partner, children who rely on them. And legal services are important, but so is food. If somebody gets contacted by ICE or other law enforcement agencies, the most important thing they can do or that we can tell them to do is to contact us before taking any further action. There is such a huge difference in terms of you go into a law enforcement interaction without an attorney and you go in with an attorney. And I say that to say, look, like sometimes you go in with the attorney and you still get detained. We may not be able to change the outcome, but our documentation, our advocacy, our information gathering allows us to then continue to fight for you really hard. So that's on the detainee context. And I tell people these days, if the only thing you hear me, you remember I said, it's call a lawyer. Call a lawyer. Even lawyers will call a lawyer because we don't represent ourselves. We shouldn't. More broadly, what can the community do? Show up. Show up consistently, not just for Sami, but for everyone. And what I mean by that is I always wonder how much time is spent on WhatsApp forwarding videos, right? Or around the living room or the masjid complaining about something versus I'm not even saying, hey, go run for school board, but attend the school board meetings, attend the city council meetings. In most of these places, there's a very low barrier to entry to doing that. And there's no reason, Hussam said earlier, speaking out is our mandate as Muslims. We do a really good job of speaking to each other, but we can't mobilize power unless we're showing up. And Sami said something really compelling when we did a webinar with him a couple of weeks ago. He said that his ability to eventually walk free faster than most people do in those very same shoes was a reflection of what was possible. And what I worry about is we do that, we see it, we get a glimmer of hope, we celebrate, and then we forget. Well, Leqaa Kordia is still in detention, and Yaqub Ira is still in detention. And by the way, the facility that Sami is at has, I think the guards were telling me that they average 650 to 750 detainees. Other Muslims, but also our brothers and sisters who are just our neighbors. We have to show up, and we have to show up consistently. Ultimately, as Muslims, we believe that the outcome is in Allah's hands. Like, we are tasked with being facilitators of it. And it's an honor, not an obligation. Like, I don't think it's an obligation. I don't personally do it out of guilt. I don't think Hussam does it out of guilt. I do it because I want to be a part of this. Like I said to someone about Sami's case, about working at CAIR, about all these cases, it's like, I want to get in. Like, tell me how I can say, Ya Allah, I did something. Like, I tried my best with what you gave me. And so the outcome is not in our hands. But what is did I show up to the school board meeting? Does my mayor know me, right? Am I a thorn in their side? Or do they love me because I say thank you? Like, how am I engaging? And when it comes down to it, if I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm living in the United States and I have a roof over my head and I have food on the table, I am among the most privileged people in the world. And that's not by accident. I'm not better than anyone else. That's my test.
Hussam, if you wanted to add anything, especially for maybe people who don't get to work for CAIR and don't feel like they can do enough to help out.
Yeah, certainly a lot could be done. There's no one who cannot do something. Like, if you start by showing up to your community events, showing up to CAIR events, support students, be there at their events, spread hope. You know, who is not on a WhatsApp group? You know, probably each is on 30 WhatsApp groups, maybe too many.
Just 30?
Cut down on some, maybe. But spread hope, spread ways of proactive, positive change rather than the sky is falling. But my firm belief is, I mean, throughout history, from the time of our history as a country or as an ummah, as the Muslim ummah, there hasn't been a case of change as a result of one individual making the case. Every individual inspired, there were amazing people who inspired change, from Dr. King, Malcolm X in our American history, and from the history of Islam, from starting with the time of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even the Prophet, supported by Allah and His angels, did not bring change by himself. He built a group of companions, as we know, men and women who were righteous, that he built in them the courage to help make the movement possible. So for me, I would say be part of organized efforts. Find the organization that's closest to your heart. If you're into da'wah, go ahead, join. MashaAllah, Why Islam, join MAS, ICNA, great organizations that are available in the community. If you're into building mosques, join the committee at your mosque and help expand the masjid, build the schools. And so if you're into building political power in America, protecting your rights, protecting those mosques and schools that we're building.
And protecting CAIR itself.
And protecting CAIR, protecting the organizations, protecting the future of our children. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's our way of life in America today is under threat. Probably one of the most serious threats in recent history, with fascism being normalized. If you've enjoyed and benefited from that constitution, and I think all of us have, it is worth defending it. And for that to be defended, we need to be part of organized effort. And I call upon people. Obviously, I work for CAIR. I have a passion for this work, political work, community organizing, civil rights, protection, countering Islamophobia. It is probably more needed than anything else now. But if that's not your cup of tea, it's okay. But be organized, count. Because the reality is, anyone who's not part of the solution is automatically, unintentionally, part of the problem. Because at the end of the day, people like Zahra will still have to defend them. And if they have a problem, they will, regardless whether they're active or not, whether they like civil rights or not, If their children face bullying, they're going to call one of our attorneys. We're going to have to,
Yeah.
if their measure is under attack, we're going to have to be there. So for me, instead of watching, instead of being a spectator as a Muslim, make a decision to say, I'm going to be part of the solution. Find the space where it works for you. You know, if you can write, start writing op-eds, write letters to the editor. If you can speak, show up to these city hall meetings, city council meetings, school board meetings, candidate forums, and speak up. Raise your hand. Say, hey, if you have the gift of organizing people, organize people at your masjid to vote. Organize people to host a candidate forum at your masjid. If you can, if you have the ability to lead, join the board. So many good organizations, including CAIR, are seeking board members. There's no shortage of options, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Honestly,
You can find a lane.
there's like many layers. Actually, the problem is you have many options.
Yeah.
If a person is not finding the option, in my opinion, they're not trying hard.
And in that vein, I like to ask and close with my guests with one of my favorite questions is there a verse in the Quran or example of the Prophet that grounds you in your work? Maybe we can start with you, Hussam, and then close with you, Zahra.
One of those tough questions because there are so many verses that guide our life. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-'adl. Allah enjoin justice, wal-ihsan, and kindness. That's what Allah enjoins. That's what Allah orders us. And if we believe in Allah, we follow that. But probably one of my favorite, there's another one. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin. Allah does not change the conditions of people until they change themselves. But my favorite one is what brings me at core. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ is the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing Muhammad, peace be upon him, as his message. He said, and we have not sent you, O Muhammad, Allah is saying, except as mercy to mankind. So protecting people's dignity, protecting people's ability to live with dignity, with justice, with freedom, with liberty, to be secure with their homes, secure for a job, secure for basic human rights, is the utmost show of mercy. And the beautiful part about this verse is rahmatan lil alameen, is mercy to all the worlds, actually, to be specific, not just for Muslims, and actually not only just for human beings, for everything that exists, the environment, people, our neighbors, Muslims, non-Muslims. And it has to be manifested in the way we do the work. And sometimes as civil rights attorneys, we have to be harsh, we have to sue, we have to condemn the wrongdoers, and we will never shy away from that. But I want to make sure that I remind our viewers and our listeners and ourselves, we can use the reminder all the time. We have to be driven in the purpose of mercy.
Zahra, if you would like to share too.
It's so funny. What's coming to mind for me right now is the Battle of Badr. So it's like mercy and war. Sometimes in doing this work, and particularly for people who are newer to it and are feeling overwhelmed by it, it can feel like we just keep losing or our numbers are so small. And I think back to one of the seminal battles in our early history in which our numbers are so small, but there are also angels fighting alongside us. And so it's not about the numbers. It's about the effort. It's about faith that if we are doing what Allah commands, that we will succeed. And it's also about the long arc, because Islam doesn't begin and end with that battle. There are others that we lose. There are others that we win. The religion grows, people struggle, and people keep moving. And so in this work, in this moment, people ask me sometimes, do you think Palestine will be free in our lifetime? And I say, yes, I believe that it will. I have to believe that it will, because I have faith that Allah will do that. Do you think that we will overcome authoritarianism in our lifetime? Yes. Do you think that we will abolish ICE in our lifetime? Yes. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes you look around and it feels like you're just that small army of a few hundred. The angels are fighting with us. These efforts are longer term, and it's not even just about Palestine or just about authoritarianism or just about ICE. There is the long arc, and so we keep working, doing, and fighting, figuratively, but onward.
Well, thank you, Jazakumullah khairan, to the both of you for your tireless efforts in defending the Muslim community, even the broader community, and sharing your insights with us. It's a pleasure to have both of you on. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
If you enjoyed the episode, please visit our Patreon page to support independent media that features timely discussions relevant to you and the American Muslim community. Also, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts. This helps our channel reach more viewers and bring you more quality content. Thank you, and may Allah reward you.